the arrival, the Galactic Empire had ruled for centuries, its fleet towering over countless star systems, controlling every corner of the galaxy. Its power seemed unshakable. Every race, every planet, every civilization bowed to its might. The Empire's battleships, with their sleek designs and overwhelming firepower, were feared across the stars. But even the most powerful empire could not predict what would happen next. It was a day like any other when the alarm sounded across the Empire's flagship, the Eclipse. The massive warship, a symbol of the Empire's strength, suddenly flickered with warning lights. At first, the crew thought it was a malfunction. After all, these systems were designed to handle anything. But the officers in the command center quickly realized this was no ordinary problem. A new object had appeared on the edge of their space. It was on their scanners, but the readings made no sense. The size, shape, and composition of the object didn't match anything they had in their database. It was small for a warship, yet it gave off a strange energy signature unlike anything the Empire had encountered before. As the readings continued to baffle them, the commander's voice echoed across the deck. "What is that?" In the heart of the flagship, Admiral Cale stood in front of the large holoscreen, studying the unknown object carefully. He was a seasoned leader, known for his calm demeanor and quick decisions, but today, even his confidence wavered. "It's human-made," one of the officers finally spoke. But that couldn't be. The humans were still a minor race, barely able to hold their ground in the galaxy, let alone produce a warship of such advanced technology. The object grew larger on their screens. It was moving toward the Empire's territory, and fast. "Intercept." Immediately, Cale commanded, "Send the fleet. Prepare for engagement." As the orders were given, the Imperial fleet, known for its overwhelming power, began to deploy. The Eclipse, along with several destroyers, rushed to intercept the unknown vessel. They weren't sure what they were facing, but they knew one thing for sure. They had to destroy it before it posed any threat. The human ship appeared on the radar, now closer. It was sleek, angular, and unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. It didn't have the massive guns of their warships, nor did it have the vast shields that most of their enemies used. It was different in every way. The humans had built something that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. This will be over quickly, Admiral Cale thought. His fleet had never lost a battle. It was a certainty in the Empire that no force, not even the most advanced races, could challenge them. But what they didn't know was that this human warship was far from ordinary. The battle began with a deafening roar of laser fire as the human ship opened fire. Its weapons were small, but precise, so precise that the Empire's warships couldn't even react in time. Ships began to explode in the void of space, their hulks drifting, torn apart by the small but devastating blasts. Admiral Cale watched in disbelief as one of his most powerful destroyers was obliterated in seconds. "What are we dealing with?" He couldn't help but mutter, his hands tightening on the controls. The human warship moved swiftly, almost as if it was dancing through space, evading every shot fired by the Imperial fleet. One by one, the Empire's ships fell. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were attacking with surgical precision, targeting weak points in the Empire's fleet, taking out engines, shields, and weapon systems in a matter of moments. The Imperial ships were struggling to keep up, unable to match the human ship's speed and accuracy. Back on the Eclipse, the atmosphere was tense. Officers scrambled to send out distress calls to the Empire's central command. The situation was dire. This was no ordinary enemy. It wasn't just a threat, it was a nightmare in the making. This, This is impossible, one officer whispered. How can humans have this kind of power? They should have been crushed by us, not the other way around. As the battle raged on, Admiral Cale's mind raced. He had never faced an enemy like this. But one thing was clear. This human warship was not a random attack. It was a statement. It was a declaration of war. The human race was no longer the weak, insignificant species the Empire had thought they were. They were here to fight, and they had the power to win. The battle continued for hours, and by the time the Imperial fleet retreated, it was clear that this was only the beginning. The human warship had survived, and it had sent a message to the Empire. We are not to be underestimated. Admiral Cale stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, staring at the empty space where the human ship had vanished. He didn't know where it had gone, but he knew one thing for sure. The galaxy was never going to be the same. Humanity was no longer just a footnote in the Empire's history. They were a force to be reckoned with. The tension in the air was thick as the Empire's leadership gathered to discuss the next steps. But Admiral Cale had one thought that he couldn't shake. If this is what humans can do with one ship, what else are they capable of? The stage was set. The Empire had been shaken to its core. The war had only just begun, and no one knew where it would lead. Asterisk, the shockwave, the news of the human warship's victory spread like wildfire across the Galactic Empire. The once unshakable confidence of the Empire's commanders now seemed like a distant memory. A sense of dread had taken root in the hearts of those who once believed that no one could challenge their authority. How could this have happened? The humans, once nothing more than a scattered, insignificant species, had now made their presence known in the most violent way possible. Admiral Cale stood in the Empire's War Council, surrounded by the top officials of the military, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the warship, the way it moved, the way it struck. Every calculation, every move was precise. The humans weren't just fighting, they were winning, and in a way that no one had ever anticipated. We must respond. The Emperor's chief strategist, General Turan, spoke sharply, his voice heavy with concern. If we let this go unchecked, it will be the end of our dominance. But how? Cale interjected, his voice strained. How do we fight something we don't understand? The room went silent, and all eyes turned toward Cale. The weight of the situation was beginning to sink in for everyone. The human warship had shattered the belief that the Empire was invincible. The very foundation of their power was now being questioned. The humans have technology beyond our understanding. General Turan continued, we must learn more about them. We can't let them take any more ground. Admiral Cale stared at the map on the table where the path of the human ship was marked. It had already destroyed 2 of their outposts in the outer rim, and now the ship was moving deeper into Imperial territory, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. We can't let them reach the core, Cale muttered to himself. We need to stop them before they gain any more ground. The room was filled with tension. They had no clear plan, no solution to this impossible problem. What the Empire was facing was a species that had done the unimaginable, conquered them in a single battle. The Emperor's voice cut through the silence, its cold, commanding tone filling the room. Prepare the fleets. We will crush this threat before it grows any larger. I want all Imperial ships in position. We will not allow this warship to leave our space. Asterisk, the Empire's response was swift. The Imperial fleet assembled in high numbers. Hundreds of destroyers and battleships now stationed on the outer edges of the human ship's path. The Emperor wasn't taking any chances. The humans had caught them off guard once, but now they would be ready. However, the Empire had one major flaw. They underestimated the enemy again. They thought the human warship's strike had been a fluke, something that could be corrected with enough force, but they were wrong. The human warship, having survived the initial battle, was no longer retreating. Instead, it began to shift its course, heading straight toward the heart of the Empire's forces. It moved silently, without fear, as if daring the Empire to come after it. On board the warship, Commander Soren, the leader of the human crew, stared out at the stars. He had seen enough destruction, enough devastation, to last a lifetime. But today, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something greater. "We've breached the perimeter," Soren said, turning to his crew. "Now we go deeper. We need to strike where it hurts most. The Empire is rotten from the inside. We've seen the cracks, and now it's time to exploit them." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara, nodded. "We've got their attention. Let's make sure they never forget our names." The warship's crew was small but efficient. They weren't just soldiers, they were rebels, outcasts, and visionaries who had come together to take down a giant. They understood the importance of precision, the importance of every move. They weren't there to just fight, they were there to break the chains that the Empire had placed on the galaxy. The Empire's fleet, led by Admiral Kale, watched in disbelief as the human warship closed in on them. It was as if the ship knew exactly where to strike, always avoiding their fire and always leaving chaos in its wake. One by one, the Empire's ships fell, their advanced shields and weapons useless against the unexpected tactics of the human ship. But the humans weren't done. The warship wasn't just about destruction, it was about sending a message. They had crossed the line, and they were ready to finish what they started, in the heart of the Empire's capital. The Emperor watched the unfolding battle with growing fury. For the first time in his reign, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. These humans, with their strange, unpredictable tactics, were breaking everything the Empire had worked so hard to build, ordered the fleet to retreat. The Emperor commanded, slamming his fist on the table. "We can't risk losing any more ships." But the retreat was no use. The damage had already been done. The human warship continued its assault, moving swiftly through the Empire's outer defenses, tearing through their ships like paper. The Empire had no choice but to retreat further, unsure of how to stop the relentless advance of this unknown enemy. As the battle raged on, Admiral Kale stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, watching helplessly as his fleet scattered. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a battle, it was a war. And if they didn't act quickly, it might be the Empire's last. "We have underestimated them," Kale muttered to himself. "And now we will pay the price." The human warship had done more than just win a battle. It had shaken the foundations of the Galactic Empire itself, and now the entire galaxy would know the truth. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Empire was no longer the only power in the galaxy. The question now was how much further would the humans go, and could the Empire stop them before it was too late? The Empire Strikes Back. The galaxy had always believed that the Galactic Empire was the undisputed master of the stars. Its vast fleets were unbeatable, its weapons unmatched, and its grip on power absolute. But after the shocking defeats they suffered at the hands of the human warship, The Empire was now facing something it had never encountered: doubt in the cold, sterile chambers of the Imperial High Command. Admiral Kale paced back and forth. His fleet had been decimated in just a matter of hours. Their strategy, their strength, their arrogance had all been shattered by a single human ship. How could this be? How had they allowed a race so primitive, so insignificant, to become such a threat? The Emperor's voice echoed through the halls of the High Command, chilling every officer in the room. The time for patience is over. We have let this human incursion go on long enough. It ends now. The Emperor's orders were final. As always, Kale was given the task of assembling the Empire's strongest and most ruthless fleet. They would strike at the heart of the human warship's operations and crush it once and for all. This would not be another retreat. This time, they would fight with everything they had. Prepare for the most aggressive assault the galaxy has ever seen, Kale said, turning to his officers. We'll hunt them down, and we will burn their ship to ashes. As the Empire's flagship, the Eclipse, prepared for battle, Kale couldn't ignore the nagging thought that lingered in the back of his mind. The humans weren't acting like the Empire's other enemies. They were strategic, calculated. Their attacks weren't random, they were intentional. Every move, every strike, was part of a bigger plan, and that made them dangerous. Meanwhile, far beyond the Empire's borders, the human warship continued its journey through the galaxy, leaving nothing but destruction behind. Commander Soren stood on the bridge, staring out into the vast expanse of space. His crew had been through the worst of it, but they had held on. And now, they had one goal: to break the Empire once and for all. We've already taken down their outposts, Soren said, turning to Lieutenant Mara. But now we need to strike at the Empire's core. We need to destroy their heart, their central fleet. If we can take that down, their entire war machine will collapse. Mara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We can do this. We've already shattered their confidence. All we need is one final push. But as the human warship moved deeper into Imperial space, they knew the Empire would not give up easily. The Eclipse, alongside the Empire's most advanced battleships, was already heading toward them. The humans were about to face the full wrath of the Empire, and they had to be prepared for the fight of their lives. The battle began with a deafening roar. The Empire's fleet, now in full formation, fired their weapons with deadly accuracy. Massive energy beams streaked across space, tearing through the void. The human warship responded quickly, darting through the incoming fire with ease. Its small but agile form dodging and weaving like a dancer on the battlefield. Target there. Engines, Soren ordered, his voice calm but commanding. We need to slow them down. The human warship's weapons unleashed a rapid barrage of fire, hitting the Empire's ships in their most vulnerable spots. Explosions erupted across the Imperial fleet, sending pieces of starships drifting into the void. It was an incredible sight, one that left the Empire's commanders reeling. Admiral Kale stood at the helm of the Eclipse, watching as his fleet struggled to keep up with the agile human warship. He couldn't believe his eyes. For every ship that fired upon the humans, another one was destroyed. It was as if the human warship was always one step ahead, always outsmarting them. We can't keep this up, an officer cried. Their tactics are flawless. Kale gritted his teeth. No, we can't lose now. We have to finish this. Full offensive, now. The Empire launched everything they had, sending wave after wave of ships to corner the human warship. It seemed like an unstoppable assault. But as they closed in, the human ship did something unexpected, vanished. The Empire was stunned. For a moment, there was nothing but the emptiness of space. But then, Kale saw it on the other side of his fleet. The human warship had reappeared. It was attacking from behind, striking the Empire's fleet at its weakest point. "Focus fire," Kale barked. "Take them down." But the human ship was too quick. It hit hard and fast, targeting the most important ships in the fleet, the ones that kept the Empire's entire structure in place. In seconds, more Imperial ships were in flames, their engines crippled, their weapons useless. And then, just when it seemed like the Empire would lose everything, the human warship fired its final shot, a massive pulse of energy that ripped through the eclipse, tearing through its shields and causing the flagship to explode in a burst of light. The Empire's most powerful warship, the symbol of their dominance, was no more. Admiral Kale stood in the wreckage of the command bridge, his face pale as the reality set in. "This is not possible," he muttered, staring out into the abyss. His fleet was broken, scattered, defeated. But even in the face of defeat, the Empire refused to accept its fate. It wasn't over. Not yet. Back on the human warship, Commander Soren and his crew watched as the eclipse disintegrated into the stars. "This is just the beginning," Soren said, a grim smile forming on his lips. "The Empire may have lost a ship, but we've won the battle. Now we take the war to them." The warship turned, heading deeper into the heart of the Empire's defenses. There was no turning back now. The human race had made its mark, and the Empire would never be the same again. The final strike, the stars seemed to hold their breath as the human warship, battered but undeterred, pushed deeper into the heart of the Empire's territory. The eclipse was gone, along with many of the Empire's finest ships. Their confidence had been shattered, their strength revealed as fragile. But the war was far from over. Commander Soren stood in the command center of the human warship, his hands resting lightly on the controls. His crew was weary, but their resolve was unshaken. They had come this far, and now they could not afford to stop. Not when the galaxy's greatest oppressor was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. "Where is their next line of defense?" Soren asked, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of tension. "Lieutenant." Mara, his trusted second in command, turned to him with a map of the Empire's inner systems. "They've pulled back to regroup," she said, scanning the data. "But they're assembling another fleet, a bigger one. They're ready to make one final stand." Soren nodded grimly. This was it, the last stand. The Empire's forces had been crushed, but the heart of their military power still beat in the form of this last fleet. If they could destroy it, the Empire would be finished. But if the Empire managed to regroup and fight back, the humans would lose everything they had fought for. "We have to be smarter than they are," Soren said, turning to his crew. "We've already seen their tactics. Now we fight on our terms." The human warship moved forward, its stealth systems engaged, slipping silently through the darkness of space. The Empire's new fleet was already positioned, a massive collection of warships and battle stations. Their strength had been bolstered by some of the Empire's best commanders, but even they couldn't deny the fear that hung in the air. They knew the human warship was capable of anything. The Empire's fleet, positioned on the outskirts of a deep space sector, had established a defensive liner series of massive, heavily armed stations, built to withstand the most powerful of assaults. They had come to believe these stations were impregnable, their weapons more than enough to crush the human threat. But Soren knew better. The Empire had forgotten something critical. The humans didn't fight the way they did. They didn't rely on brute force. Instead, they used precision, guile, and intelligence. The moment the Empire thought they were safe, the human warship would strike. The battle began as the human warship closed in on the first defensive station. The Empire's guns opened fire, but the human ship was already on the move, dodging. In ways that made no sense, impossible angles, unpredictable motions. The Empire's soldiers, well-trained and battle-hardened, were caught off guard. The human warship didn't engage in a direct assault. Instead, it targeted the weak points of the Empire's defensive stations, the engines, the shields, the vulnerable weapon systems. With each strike, a station was crippled, its defenders unable to respond in time. The Empire's response was chaotic. They weren't just fighting a warship, they were fighting an entire new way of warfare. "This is impossible," a commander of the Empire shouted as he watched the human ship's movements. "They're tearing apart our defenses. We can't keep up." Soren watched from the bridge as the battle raged on. "Don't stop. Don't let them recover. We can't afford to hesitate." For hours, the human warship darted between the stations, picking them off one by one. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as Imperial ships and stations began to fall. The Empire's fleet had been caught completely off guard. What they had assumed were invincible strongholds were now reduced to rubble. The human warship pushed deeper, now headed directly for the heart of the Empire's remaining fleet. The final line of defense, the last hope of the Empire, was now under direct attack. As Soren's ship approached, he could see the glint of the Empire's final bastion, a massive, nearly indestructible war fortress surrounded by dozens of smaller ships. "This is it," Soren muttered under his breath. The last fight. The human warship shifted its course, closing in on the fortress. But before they could get close enough, the Empire launched everything they had left. The final battle was upon them. The warship was hit, the hull shuddering under the onslaught of fire from the Empire's remaining fleet. But it held strong. Soren could feel the crew's collective will, their strength, their unity. This was not just about defeating the Empire, it was about ensuring that the galaxy would never again suffer under their rule. "We need to disable their engines," Soren ordered. "If we can't take out that fortress, we'll stop them from escaping." The crew worked quickly, coordinating a series of surgical strikes that shattered the Empire's fortress's defense shields. The Empire's ships struggled to keep up with the human warship's relentless precision. And then, with one final, focused blow, the human ship destroyed the fortress's main reactor. A massive explosion shook the battlefield, and the once bastion of Imperial power was no more. But the battle didn't end there. As the remains of the fortress drifted into space, the surviving Imperial ships began to scatter. Their commanders realized what Soren had already known they had lost. There was no recovery. The human warship had delivered the killing blow. The human crew watched in stunned silence as the Empire's forces scattered. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, was free from the Empire's grasp. "We've done it," Mara whispered, as the silence on the bridge spoke louder than any victory cry. Soren stood up, his eyes fixed on the remnants of the Empire's final stronghold. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. "The galaxy may be free, but there's still much work to be done." As the human warship slowly turned toward the unknown, the crew knew one thing for sure. They had changed the course of history. The Empire had been crushed, but new battles would come. New enemies would rise. But for the first time in a long time, The human race stood ready to face whatever came next.